Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very special guest here for the show today. Excuse the noise, it may fluctuate, but I was on emergency circumstances. So I just wanted to go ahead and give him the floor while he introduced who he is and where he's from.
Hi, Kimberly. My name is Kim, actually Kimbrell Curry. Kimbrell in my family is a last name, but my mother always told me to tell people that Kimbrell was the male version of Kimberly, although I've never met another man named Kimbrell before in my life, and if you Google it, I'm the only one. I'm Kimbrell Curry, 69 years old this coming April 20th. I spent a life in radio at the age of 17. My dad got me started in the business. I spent the next 33 years traveling around the country, San Antonio, Texas, Knoxville, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and I spent 25 of 33 years in Miami, Florida. The last 9 years as the program director of the very famous Power 96 radio in Miami, still there, still famous. And in 2005, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which forced me out of my work. I couldn't do my job the way I needed to do it. So I had to get out of the business and let the radio station move forward. That always was important to me. I spent the next 8 years being beaten up by multiple sclerosis. MS leaves lesions in your brain, which affects different parts of your body. You lose nerve ending health, myelin disintegrates. And for 8 years, I was really concerned. You don't die from MS, but you die from the complications. And all of my complications were getting pretty serious for 8 years. And then my doctor magically changed my medicine. And over about a year period after my medicine changed, my condition leveled off. I'm not getting any better. I'm not getting any worse. I've learned to live this way. I'm a very happy man. I now am a writer. I'm working on my 4th book. I've published 3. My memoir, which is called Come Get Me, Mother, I'm Through, tells the story about my radio career and the MS diagnosis. I have 2 other books out now, one called The Death of Fairness, which is in reference to a law that 1987 President Reagan vetoed. That law required equal time for contrasting points of view. That means if you heard somebody on a radio or TV station saying a lie or giving disinformation, you had the right as a citizen to go in and demand equal time to prove that lie. In 1987, Ronald Reagan got rid of that law. We've had nothing but lies spewed with no debate since 1987. Look at the division in this country. I'll point right there at that particular moment in time responsible for where we are in today's history. My next book, I'm working on it now, the 4th book, is going to explain how we can fix all of it and get back to normal, because you really could if you really dedicated yourself to do so. So that's me. How are you, Kimberly?
I'm doing good. Tell me about, your first radio station. You said at the age of 17, your dad invited you to get on the radio. Tell me about that experience. How was the statistics? Was there a lot of people around? Like, what was the population like for listeners?
Okay. Little Cañon City, Colorado. In the county, there was only 21,000 people in 1976. Actually, in 1972, when I got my job there. My dad came home one day and there was only one radio station, and my dad worked there. He was a news guy there. And one day he came home and he asked me if I wanted to babysit at the radio station. And I thought I was going to go babysit the boss's kids. And that's because that's how I made my money in high school. I was a busy guy. I was in the band. I was in the theater. I made money by babysitting my parents' friends' kids. So when he said they need you to babysit at the radio station, I thought I was going to go babysit kids. When I got there, they said they needed me to babysit the Sunday Morning God Show. In 1972, the radio station would record all the services at the churches in town, and the following week play them back on the radio Sunday morning, and nobody wanted that job. So they needed a high school kid. That was me. And my only 2 responsibilities during that time was to make sure that the tapes would go on and you were hearing it. And my other responsibility was to give the station identification at the top of every hour. That meant I had to turn the microphone on and say the words, "This is KRLN, Cañon City, Colorado, the station with the news reputation." And me saying that in my headphones, I heard myself and I thought, this is my career. This is what I want to do.
That's
So,
how I feel too, Kim. So,
yeah,
so after you did that, what was the next step? Elaborate on how you grew.
okay. Well, it was pretty simple. I went to college. I didn't know anything about how to do it. This little radio station was quite antiquated. It had been on since the early 40s. The equipment was old. The people were old. So I went to college, to Southern Colorado State College over in Pueblo, Colorado, now part of the Colorado State University system. I took broadcasting classes over there for 2.5 years, and I worked part-time on one of the local top 40 radio stations. Once a week, I got to go in and play real radio with the big boys. And you couldn't call a guy Kim on the radio in the 1960s and 70s. There weren't that many Kims out there. So the boss came up with a name for me. He called me Gary Paxton. And the way he got that name was he looked at a 45 single of the Monster Mash, which was written by a guy by the name of Gary Paxton. So he said, that's going to be your name because we can't call you Kim. We just don't do that. So that was part-time on the radio while I was going to college. And after a couple of years of being in school and doing my part-time thing, I thought, I can go do this full-time. So I started applying for jobs around the country and got my first full-time job in 1976 at a little radio station in Knoxville, Tennessee called 15Q, which they thought was real cute. And what's funny is as I was driving across the country, I was going to go on the radio at 10 o'clock at night, Kimberly, and I knew I couldn't call myself Kim. So I wanted to come up with a fresh radio name. And in those days, in the 70s, there was the Wolfman and Boogie. There was Dr. Brock, the ugliest jock in rock. So I had to come up with a name for myself. So being on the radio at 10 o'clock at night, I thought I would call myself Night Smoke. So when I drove up to the radio station, the first day I got to town, I walked up into the door and opened it, and there was a lady at the reception desk and a big guy behind her with curly hair and a Hawaiian shirt on. And I reached out my hand to the reception lady and I said, hello, ma'am, I'm Night Smoke. I'm your new nighttime DJ. And the guy behind her, the big guy, says, well, if it isn't Kid Curry. Well, you see, when I was young, there was a TV show and there was a movie. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was a TV show in the early 70s called, I forgot it. But it was a TV show that was a takeoff of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And the two characters were Kid Curry and Hannibal Hayes. So when I was in high school, all my friends would make jokes about, hey, it's Kid Curry. So I didn't like the name. So when the guy says to me, well, if it isn't Kid Curry, I turned up at him and said, I don't like that name. And he said, well, then I won't sign your paycheck. And I said, Kid Curry it is. So it was a very smart thing to do because there's only one Kid Curry in the history of radio. It was me. There's a bunch of Bill Tanners, Robert Walkers, Johnny Walkers. There's all sorts of guys with the same name, but there was only one Kid Curry. And because of my style on the radio, you couldn't really try to be me. You couldn't do that because you're just trying to be Kid Curry. You can't do that because of the way I put my show together. So that was my unique name. It was my first full-time job in Knoxville. 6 months after that, I'm off to the big time in Miami, which was cool.
Now tell me all of the personalities, the artists you met, and how it changed from being in the beginning with radio, because this is a huge, more bigger radio company. So tell me the differences between the two to the third one. This is your junior radio station, right?
Well, this would have been my second radio station, which would be in Miami. And then I actually worked, my third radio station was also in Miami. So I went to Knoxville. I traveled down to Miami. I was there for about a year working on the number 2 radio station in town, the number 2 top 40 station. Our boss gets fired. And now I'm looking around the country to try to come up with a new job. And the guy at the number 1 radio station in Miami calls and says, hey, I think I like you. I think I want to hire you to come to my station. And it was a good thing because that radio station was historic and legendary. And everybody in America, if you were a radio DJ, you were talking about Y100. Everybody wanted to be on Y100. And so I got my second Miami job at Y100. And it was a real important time in my life. And you talk about the people that you come in and out of. The first stars I ever met were Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis. In 1976, they were at the airport in Miami. Our music director at the radio station said, "Hey, I'm going to go have lunch with Marilyn McCoo. You want to come with me?" So I said, "Sure." So we drove to Miami Airport and had dinner with Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis, which was very cool. The first radio interview I ever did was with...
Remind me of who Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis is.
I'm sorry, the Fifth Dimension. That's what they were. The new group was the Fifth Dimension. They did, Aquarius, Let the Sun Shine In.
Let the sun shine.
Yeah, that's their song. And One Less Bell to Answer, which is a classic. One Less Bell to Answer. And that was her song. So Marilyn McCoo, Billy Davis, two big stars. My first ones I met. My first radio interview was with Bob Hope. I could never understand why little kid Curry was talking to old man Bob Hope, and it was a terrible interview. But from there, I went over to Y100, and then, as I said, Y100 at the time in 1977 through the 1980s was a very important radio station in America. Everybody wanted to be on Y100, and the Bee Gees were down there. Casey and the Sunshine Band was down there. In fact, Casey and my boss, Bill Tanner, were best friends. So the radio station always had stars in it. The Gibbs were always there. Casey, his band, were always there. I remember Michael Jackson's mother used to come and visit Bill Tanner all the time because they just liked each other. They were both, I think, from Mississippi or something like that. I got in trouble once with Andy Gibb.
Tell me about it.
Well, okay. So Andy and I became friends. Back in those days, guys would imbibe in a little marijuana every now and then. And he and I liked to get together and smoke a joint. And so there was a time when we were on South Beach. He was planning, I think there was a videotape of something going on. And we were sitting in the trailer. I don't know if I can say this.
Say it PG-13 and I'm okay with it.
Well, everybody... Okay, so I think these people may have passed away already, so it may be okay. But it was Victoria Principal, who he had a relationship for a while, and she threw me out of the trailer. She was mad at me because she thought it was me, but no, it was Andy's. But anyway, never mind. These are all crazy stories that were so long ago, 30, 40 years ago, that nobody cares. But, that's... Well, that's just what happens to guys on the radio. When you're on a big radio station, people want to be on your station. So they come and they try to promote. And guys of all different styles. In fact, I was on the radio one night at Y100, and Rodney Dangerfield, the comedian, showed up one night. He was there filming the Caddyshack down in Fort Lauderdale. And so one night...
I remember that. I remember, yes.
Yeah. Well, one night, because I had a really good radio show. So when you were in Miami, people listened, and he was listening and decided he was just going to walk in one night. And I turned around and there was Rodney Dangerfield, and I stopped and just let him take over my show for a while. And he was imbibing in things that made him snort. So it was just crazy. And then one time, Frank Sturgis. Now that name is going to ring a few bells. Frank Sturgis was a Watergate burglar. I turn around one day, I'm on the radio, and I sense someone behind me. I turn around, and it's Frank Sturgis, the Watergate burglar, wanted to come and watch me do my radio show. It was crazy. Big time. Fun. But there's all sorts of stories like that, Kimberly. I could go on for hours.
Tell me. That's okay. Tell me about the one with P. Diddy and the rest of the people we talked about behind the scenes.
Well, again, when I became program director of Power 96 in 1996, I had just become PD after, Biggie got killed and then Tupac got shot. And it was a pretty crazy time in the music industry. And I was running again, the biggest radio station in Miami, Florida. So everybody was coming to town wanting to have their songs on my station. And P. Diddy came in a couple times. We became friends. I actually attended a white party out in LA one time at his place. He's a very nice guy. He's always kind to me because I played his songs. It's funny how that works. And a very nice guy. And I've got lots of pictures out there with me and P. Diddy. In fact, there's one on my Facebook page now. It's just, I was celebrating a friend's birthday and P. Diddy just happened to be standing there. But that's just one of a zillion. Shakira, 50 Cent.
Tell me about Shakira.
Well, she floats when she walks. She just, she came in. We were one of the first. In fact, what made our radio station so successful in Miami, when I was program director, is I decided that because we had such a large Latino population, why couldn't you take American songs, hit records, and play some Spanglish songs in English and Spanish and put those on the same type of radio station? Because in Miami by this time, by 1996, most everybody was bilingual. So why can't you have a station that interplays both styles? So when I did that and I put the Spanish songs on the radio station along with the American hit records, the station blew up like crazy. So, it just made sense to me. So then we get people like Paulina Rubio coming to the radio station and Shakira floating by my office one day. I mean that. It looks like she floated by my office door one day. Ooh, it's Shakira. But even Wyclef Jean and I became very close friends. My father and his father died around the same time, which bonded us even more. But Cleffy's always been a special friend because it was more than me playing his songs. He and I cared for each other, and we still do. Every now and then I'll get a message from Cleffy, or one of my friends will say, "Hey, Cleffy said hi," So I just love the guy. So there are people who are stars that I had friendships with, others who were there just to promote their records. But it was just a great career, and I wouldn't do anything different. It was pretty cool. I sure wish, as I told you earlier, maybe not having MS would have continued my radio career. But as I told you earlier, as my life goes on since 1996 and 2005, when I got diagnosed, I think MS was the best thing that ever happened to me, because my life has changed to the positive since then. So,
for those who don't know, tell me about multiple sclerosis and how it affects the body. Did you have any symptoms prior to getting checked out?
Through my whole life, Kimberly, I didn't know what was going on. When I was in fifth grade, I remember one time when I was in fifth grade, I felt like the pads of my feet, like I wasn't touching the ground, like my feet weren't actually touching the ground. And the only reason I knew it was a problem, because back in those days, in the 70s and 60s, we used to do the presidential challenge, and we all you had to go run a mile and do all these extra sit-ups and all that stuff. You got a little badge. So during this thing that I was trying to qualify for, I fell, and it was because I couldn't feel my feet. And then at other times in my life, I started feeling my hands start to cramp up and they would curl up. And I thought I'd been bitten by a fire ant one time. And then one time I thought I got stung by a killer bee because I could hardly even focus. My brain was on fire. Then it would go away. That's what they call recurring remitting MS. And that's what I have. I have recurring remitting MS. And what it does, very simply, is it cramps up my legs. My legs are in constant motion. The muscles, you can see them ripple. I take medicine to try to prevent my legs from seizing, but I've been taking the same medicine since 2005. It's in pill form, and I learned about you're probably pretty much the medicine's not affecting me today as it was in 2005 because it's just got so much built in my body.
What medication is it? The two medications, the first one and the second one. Tell me about those.
The medicine I take that stops the seizures in my leg is called baclofen. And the baclofen I take 80 milligrams a day. The medicine that changed my life, the medicine that stopped everything, I was on this MS drug called Rebif. And I was on there for 8 years, and I had to take a shot every day. And my poor wife, when we first, you get diagnosed, I bail out of Miami. I come back to Colorado because the only thing I could think to do was go home to my mom. My mom was still alive then. My physical condition was desperate. The only thing I could figure to do was just to go home and get ready to see what this MS thing was all about. So they started this Rebif medicine, and 8 years into it, it didn't do anything. And then I fell like 50 times. I documented 50 different falls. And then the doctor said, we got to get you in a wheelchair because you can't fall anymore. So then, because I went from walking to canes to crutches to a wheelchair in about 3 years. So I'm still in a wheelchair. I'll never get out. But the rebif didn't work. So my doctor, when I first got diagnosed in 2005, there were only like 4 or 5 MS medicines. Well, fast forward 8 years, now there's 7 and 8 MS medicines, and he changed me over to a new one. The medicine that he changed, I took it for 6 months and nothing happened. But my doctor is a real believer that there's something about vitamin D for MS patients. Everybody is lacking in vitamin D, but MS patients are affected differently with vitamin D. And so 6 months into taking this new drug, nothing changed. But he was also telling me, I need you to take 30,000 IUs of vitamin D every day. And I'm like, that's a lot. And Kimberly, I used to have a radio show, and I was a pretty famous guy. I used to put my mom on the radio all the time. And my mom would have a cold. And at the very end of my conversation with my mom live on the radio, she'd say, take your vitamins. And I'd say, Mom, vitamins don't do anything. You've got a cold. So I blew off my doctor telling me to take vitamin D. After 6 months and nothing changed, my wife got angry and said, you're going to start taking this vitamin D like he says. And then 6 months after that, I stopped feeling like I was hearing the fingernails down the chalkboard. I don't know if anybody relates to that anymore. But there's a real cringe feeling when you've got a chronic disease and you know your body's being eaten away, and then suddenly that stops. So I took the new medicine for 6 months. Nothing really changed. But after taking all the vitamin D and the medicine for 6 months, my condition leveled off. I've not gotten any better, and I've not gotten any worse since then. So I'm now on a drug called Copaxone. Copaxone is my new drug. It works real well for me. I'm going to take it. They say after taking it for so long, maybe, I'm 69 years old in a couple of weeks. Why don't I just stop taking the medicine? Well, I'm afraid if I stop taking it, it's going to come back in worse than it was. So I'm going to stay on the medicine. I'm taking my regimen like I'm supposed to. I'm not changing anything, and I'll stay this way. And that's just got to be.
Did your insurance pay? Tell me about the insurance costs for all 3 drugs.
Okay. Fortunately, my wife, first of all, when I left Power 96 in 2005, I left with a really nice package. The company took very good care of me, which allowed my wife and me to be able to get established. Insurance was no problem because we had all the insurance we needed. However, the cost of the drugs, $30,000 a year, all being covered, but I could not do that if it was just me. So all these medicines are covered by my insurance. And as I said, my company left me with a good package. And when I left the radio station, I didn't think I just should stop living. My wife and I took the money that we had acquired in Miami and took it out to this little town that we lived in Colorado, and we started fixing and flipping houses. Now, the problem with that is my wife would have to deal with these real estate agents who she didn't like, and she didn't think she was getting very good personal care. They weren't being very good to her because she was a new person, a little Cuban girl out of Miami living in little white Cañon City, Colorado. And although I had a family name, my dad was real famous in my hometown, it took her a while to be able to break those barriers.
Well, what did the Nighthawk do? How did the Nighthawk help her?
I'm sorry, the what?
The Nighthawk, isn't that your stage name?
Oh, I don't know. I'm confused on something here. But anyway.
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
So we took the money. We started fixing and flipping. She didn't like the way people were treating her. She went out and got a real estate license. In the next 2 years, she was breaking records in my hometown. She sold 170 houses in 1 year. And that got the attention of the corporate office that she was working for. They decided they want her to teach other people how to sell houses as good as she did. And then so 7 years of her doing that, eventually she got offered the job as a CEO of a major real estate firm out of Kansas City, Missouri. So, when I said,
what is her job? She teach other people, but is she international or national?
Well, she was international teaching people because she would be on the phone on Zoom calls from 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, every 30 minutes changing to another client somewhere around the world, hearing what they were doing, getting their profit loss, trying to teach them how to do this the right way, sell houses the right way. So all of that education over a 7-year period, and then her also going to continue her education, put her in a place where she became really good at what she was doing, and word got out at these places the people she was working for, and some of the clients decided that, we need to start putting this lady in the right place. So the people in Kansas City said, you got to stop doing what you're doing and come and run our company because you're that good.
Question: how do you and your wife, how did y'all marriage cope with you having multiple sclerosis at first?
Yeah, that was more me. I was more afraid than she was. My wife is my wife. My wife loves me. She wasn't going to do anything but help me. But when you're diagnosed with a chronic disease and you realize, wait a minute, maybe this person's not going to stay with me for all this, that never, ever, ever, ever occurred. My wife has been my biggest supporter. She's there. The reason that I can survive my life is because of my wife. She's the one who does all this. She gives me a shot every day. The first shot I got in 2005, we were at my hometown. I knew a nurse that I went to high school with, and I said, listen, I've got to start taking these shots. I need you to come over and teach my wife how to give me a shot. The lady came to our hotel room and showed my wife, this is how you give these shots. And from that day till today, my wife has given me every injection that I take. I was taking a shot every day. I now am on 3 injections a week. And the progress of modern science, the same medicine I'm taking now, Copaxone, has just been approved for a once a month shot. It will be time released. It goes into your muscle, time releases. So I can now move from a shot a day, 3 shots a week, to 1 shot a month. And it's awesome because my body's been affected by, I've been poked in everywhere. So it's time for my body to take a rest from all these poking in things. So, but that's the magic of modern science. I really believe in the magic of what my doctor does and the doctors that he knows. So,
last magical question, and well said, by the way. Where do you see you and your family, including your wife, going in the future with radio and podcasting and your books?
So here's the thing. We now live on a ranch. Our daughter is 20 years old. She is a horse person. I've got 2 daughters who are horse people. My youngest, who's with us, her older sister, the one closest to her, was working with the Auburn equestrian team when she was in college. So I have 2 daughters who are horse people. So Casey, the one that's with us, has 2 horses on our property. We have about 9 acres. We've got a big barn. We've got an arena. She gets to raise horses. That's what she does. She works with horses all the time. My wife works in her little office. In fact, she's across the hall from me right now with the Zoom camera on, and she's got her offices all around. They have 5.
That she did an excellent job taking care of you. It's not easy taking care of somebody that's partially paralyzed, and she stood by your side. She deserves a shout out and a round of applause.
Well, I sometimes think that instead of interviewing me, everybody who interviews me on these podcasts should be talking to my wife. She's the genius of the family. But we're going to sit here and keep doing this. We're having a great time on our property. Surprisingly enough, it works as therapy for me. I've got 9 acres of fence that has to be painted out here. And what I do is I transfer over into a little gator. It's one of these like a little golf cart. And I get next to the fence and I pull myself out and I hold onto the fence and I scrape the old paint off and put new paint on. So it's therapy for me. I get to get out and do things I haven't been able to do since I got this wheelchair. I actually get to stand up and do things as long as I don't let go, because if I let go, I'm going to crash. But I've learned to be able to take care of things. I transfer. I have a 0-turn lawnmower. I transfer to my lawnmower. I can still mow my yard. I go out and I do all the work I have to in the arena. I groom the arena. I've got a big tractor with big equipment, so I get to do all the work out there. It's crazy to see me pull myself up on the tractor. My wife she's panicking every time I do that. But I've learned to live this life. I love it. I mean, this is where I'm supposed to be right now. And I'm going to continue writing books. Like I said, I've written 3 now. I'm in the middle of my 4th book. This book has got a lot to do with this thing again that happened in 1987. This next book is going to teach people, as I said, how they can get back to normal, bring this one law back. If you had that one law back that said, if you hear a lie, you get the right to go call that person a liar. And Reagan said in the beginning that the reason he got rid of it was because he thought it was antagonistic to the rights given in the First Amendment, the right of free speech. But what he did was he took away my right of free speech.
Oh, never mind that. Never mind.
So I want to call a liar. If you've got misinformation, if you're telling people lies, I want to tell people. I should have that right. And so Reagan got rid of that, and all you hear now, you have a network news station that admits to lying, and they just do it. And that's how they get listeners and viewers. So if you could bring that law back, you'd stop all this crap. Excuse me.
I just wanted to say, I'm going to read your senior book. When do you expect your senior book to be out?
Okay, the next book probably in the next 6 to 8 months, but you get all the information you need in book number 3, which is called Bonnie's Law, The Return to Fairness. She takes you all the way through about what happened afterwards, and what's going to happen. And then this next book that I'm writing now gives all the answers on how to fix it. And really kind of goes back because she fixes everything. I can't say anymore. Never mind. So, but that's the 4th book. So you have 2 books to look for, actually 3. My memoir, which tells a great story and tells all the great stories about my daughter farting at Gloria Estefan. That's in the memoir. The second book is The Death of Fairness, which explains what happened when Reagan rescinded that law. The next book is Bonnie's Law, The Return to Fairness, to where you see somebody finally realizing that, wait a minute, we got to stop this. And she tries to return America back to fairness. And my next book will be the completion of it, done. She gets to look back and say, see, this is how good America is because we changed the law. So it's a continuing process for me. I'm having a great time. I love to write.
Well said. One last question. If you had to give a person a piece of advice about either both multiple sclerosis and getting into the major radio stations, what would it be? And then I'm going to end with how to find you.
I hear 2 different questions. I hear how to get in the radio business. The radio business is not what it was when I was a kid. When I was a kid, there were 5,000 different owners. They owned radio stations in their state. Sometimes they owned 3 or 4 stations in their state. And then in 1996, Bill Clinton took that law out that said you could only own 7 radio or TV stations. And since 1996, you can have unlimited amounts of radio or TV stations. And so what happened? You had the corporate takeover, and now there are 4 major owners in broadcast radio. I went 5,000 when I started. There's only 4 now, which means there's a monopoly of people who have dwindled their staffs down to 3 and 4 people. They use the technology of today to be able to act like it's a live radio, but it's not. So they basically have corporate radio has destroyed the radio that I grew up in. So I'm not going to encourage anybody to get into that, only because when I left, I was making well over $200,000 as the program director of that damn big radio station. There's not a program director in America that makes that kind of money right now, because disc jockeys make $30,000 and $40,000 a year. In 1976, I was making $40,000 a year. And look at today, it's 2025 almost, and guys are barely making 30 grand a year. They're having to work at 2 or 3 different jobs just to be on the radio. So I do not encourage anyone to get in that failing business. Now, as far as multiple sclerosis, here's my doctor's book. If you have a problem and you think that if you have been diagnosed with MS or you think you might have this problem, this is your book. Optimal Health for Multiple Sclerosis by Dr. Alan Bowling. He's my doctor. I say that, but he just retired 2 weeks ago. I have a new doctor, and that was emotional because this guy saved me. I started going to this guy in 2008. 8 years later, I wasn't going to die. So I love Dr. Bowling, and Dr. Bowling saved me. So if you want to know anything about NMS and what you should be doing with your life and with your medications, it's all in that book right there. And it's a good book. It'll teach you a lot. That's the 2 questions.
How can the people find you? Well said, by the way.
I appreciate that. I'm easy to find. krcurry.com is my website, krcurry.com. On there, you'll find out about my current update, what's going on with me now. You'll find out about all the books I've already written. And then plus, I'll put put the podcasts on that I'm on. I put them on the website too. So this will eventually end up there. So it's krcurry.com.
Thank you so much. Stay on the line. Thank you so much for joining my show. Y'all take care, be safe, and I'll see y'all next time.
Kimberly, peace. Love you.